Emily hadn't had time to plan anything. She fled before sunrise, with nothing but a backpack stuffed with her daughter's clothes and 2 crumpled bills tucked into her waistband. She traveled for hours until she reached Pine Grove, a dusty little town in the northern part of the state that she barely knew. She chose it because her Aunt Martha lived there, even though they hadn't spoken in years. She didn't have a choice. She couldn't keep sleeping under the same roof as her mother's husband, not after what he'd tried to do. The worst part wasn't the act itself, but her mother's silence afterward. That silence shattered her. Martha didn't greet her with much warmth. She offered her a mattress on the floor of the sewing room, where she kept old fabrics and a machine that hadn't worked in ages. She laid down 3 rules: no trouble, no coming home late, and get a job immediately. Emily nodded without a word. Every condition reminded her she was there out of necessity, not affection. At least her daughter, Madison, had a roof over her head. The next morning, with the first rays of sunlight, Emily put on a blouse that still smelled of confinement and stepped out into the street. She wandered the downtown blocks without a plan, walking into diners, shops, and corner stores, scribbling her information on scraps of paper. She didn't have a resume, only a broken story. Most people gave her looks of pity more than interest. A few said they'd call, but she knew they wouldn't. The heat was suffocating, the asphalt was burning, and Madison was sweating in the makeshift stroller. Around noon, Emily sat on a bench in the Central Park, legs trembling, unsure if she should return home empty-handed. It wasn't the first time she thought about giving up, but just as she stood up to leave, she noticed a small piece of paper taped to the gate of a narrow shop tucked between a fruit stand and a hardware supply store. The sign read, "Help wanted. Inquire within." She hesitated for a few seconds. The place looked run down, with peeling paint and half-empty display cases, but it was the first concrete opportunity in days. She took a deep breath, adjusted the stroller, and gently pushed the door open. A rusty bell rang as it creaked wide. A woman in her 60s stepped out from behind the counter. Her hair was tied up, her skin weathered by the sun, and her eyes, surprisingly, weren't cold. She introduced herself as Mrs. Harper. When she heard Emily's story, she invited her to sit. She didn't ask for references. She didn't pry. She just listened. "This job doesn't pay much," she said. "But if you're honest and show up on time, it's yours." Emily felt a lump in her throat. She couldn't tell if it was relief or fear of trusting again. She accepted without hesitation. If stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe, tap the bell icon, and tell us in the comments about the hardest moment you've ever faced. Sometimes sharing helps us heal. Emily left the shop with a start date and a faint smile. She had no idea that this tiny storefront would change her life completely. She arrived early on her first day. Mrs. Harper was already inside, sweeping up yesterday's dust and flipping on the lights. She explained the tasks clearly: clean the shelves, arrange stock, be polite with customers, and write down every sale in a notebook. The register was old, the kind that still made a little ding when it closed. Emily listened carefully, mentally noting every instruction. For the first time in a long while, something in her life had a sense of order. The following days passed among cans, bottles, and regulars who glanced suspiciously at her unfamiliar face. Mrs. Harper watched her closely but didn't meddle. She was quiet and kept to herself, yet never impolite. Occasionally she asked about Madison, if she was eating well, if she had started preschool, if she still cried at bedtime. Sometimes, when there were extra fruit or day-old pastries, she handed them to Emily to take home. Those small acts meant more than words could say. But Emily noticed something odd from the start. At the back of the store, behind a thick curtain, there was a dark wooden door that always remained shut. It didn't have a visible handle, just a large antique lock, like something from another era. Every time Emily walked near it, she felt slightly uneasy. There were no sounds, no strange smells, yet something told her to stay away. One afternoon, while she was stacking sodas in the rear section, Mrs. Harper called to her in a hushed voice. Emily quickly approached the counter. "I need you to grab a few boxes from the back hallway," she said, "but don't open the big door. That's mine." She handed her a small key, different from the ones used for the till or the stockroom. It was rusted and tied with a red ribbon. "It only works on the gate before the room. Go straight in and don't touch anything else." Emily nodded, though her stomach tightened. She didn't ask questions. It wasn't her place, she thought. She grabbed the boxes from near the cleaning shelf and returned to the front without glancing around. But from that moment on, a seed of curiosity began to grow inside her. That room seemed to hold something beyond brooms or storage. The way Mrs. Harper spoke of it, the almost reverent tone, sparked questions Emily wasn't ready to ask. She preferred to keep her distance, focus on her tasks, and above all, keep the job. She couldn't afford to mess this up. That night, while tidying up the sewing room at Aunt Martha's, Madison asked if she could sleep with the light on. Emily gently stroked her head and said yes without hesitation. She didn't realize it would be the first of many nights where both of them would sleep less and worry more. As the weeks passed, Emily settled into the rhythm of the store. She no longer fumbled with customers or struggled to record sales. She began to recognize the neighbors, knew who always haggled and who left extra change. Mrs. Harper never praised her outright, but she slowly handed off more responsibilities, a quiet gesture Emily took as trust. Mrs. Harper kept to her pattern. Soft steps, few words, no small talk. Emily respected the boundary. She didn't want to intrude, and in truth she appreciated the calm detachment. But something about her felt off. Sometimes, Emily caught her watching too closely when she mentioned Madison, like she was holding back something she'd never say aloud. More than once, while cleaning the storage room or restocking shelves, Emily's eyes drifted back to the locked door at the rear. She hadn't touched the key since that first time. It sat untouched in the drawer with the pens. Each time she passed by, the air seemed heavier. It wasn't a smell or a breeze, just a feeling. One Wednesday afternoon, while doing inventory together, Mrs. Harper lit a small candle at the edge of the desk. Emily watched from across the counter. "Is that a vow or something?" she asked cautiously. "Something like that," Mrs. Harper replied without looking up. "Sometimes it helps to bring light where unseen things gather." Emily didn't press further, but she noticed the candles weren't from the store. They were in glass jars, decorated with ribbon and beads, and beside them were images of saints she didn't recognize. These weren't the figures she'd seen in her mother's home or in neighborhood churches. They were older, darker, unfamiliar. Another time, Emily found traces of melted wax on a shelf nobody used. Mrs. Harper didn't explain, and Emily didn't ask. Meanwhile, Madison had begun to change. She no longer felt comfortable staying with Aunt Martha. She cried at night, begged her mom not to be late, and said she hated being alone in the house. Emily assumed it was normal, a phase, but the girl had also started drawing things she never had before: hooded figures, rooms with candles, windows without light. Emily wanted to mention it to Mrs. Harper, but something stopped her. It felt like if she brought up her daughter, something would shift, as if that subject held a different kind of weight in that place. So she stayed silent. In her silence, Emily began watching more, sleeping less, and wondering whether she had started working in a store or in something else entirely. That evening, Mrs. Harper had to leave earlier than usual. She said she had a doctor's appointment and told Emily she could handle the closing. It wasn't her first time doing it alone, but something in the tone of that goodbye unsettled her. She locked the front door, counted the cash quickly, and turned off most of the lights. All that remained was to close the back storeroom and put away a half-unpacked box of goods. She walked down the long hallway with her phone's flashlight on. It wasn't something she usually did, but that night, the shop felt darker than usual. When she reached the back, Emily froze in place. A faint sound, nearly imperceptible, reached her ears, not coming from the street or the ceiling. It was like a whisper, words carried by the air, spoken too close to ignore, yet without a clear source. She spun around, pointing the light toward the corner where the wooden door stood. Her heart dropped. The door wasn't shut. It stood slightly ajar, just a few inches, but enough to show that something had changed. The old lock hung loosely, as if someone had unlatched it from the inside. Emily swallowed hard. Her instincts screamed at her to turn around and leave, but logic tried to take over. Maybe Mrs. Harper had left it that way by mistake. Maybe a draft. Maybe the old wood shifted on its own. She stepped closer quietly, as if walking through someone else's home. Her hand trembled as she held the phone. When she reached the door, she leaned in just enough to peek through the gap. She didn't push it. She didn't enter. She just looked. There was no light inside. The shadows bled together into a single murky blackness. But at the center, faintly lit by the floor's reflection, something stood. A figure. She couldn't quite make it out. It was about the size of a small girl, maybe a statue, maybe something covered, but completely still. Emily felt her throat tighten. There was no explanation for what she saw. The store didn't sell statues. Mrs. Harper had never said anything about storing decorations back there. Emily backed away slowly, leaving the door as it was. She walked back to the front counter with her heart pounding against her spine. She didn't finish shutting down the store. She didn't count the drawer again. She just grabbed her purse and locked the front door behind her, twice. By the time she got home, Madison was already asleep. Aunt Martha didn't ask questions. She simply left a cold plate of food on the table. Emily didn't touch it. She sat at the edge of the bed, watching her daughter sleep. The image of the figure in the dark wouldn't let her go. She couldn't explain what she'd seen, but she could feel it. Something else was inside that store. Something that shouldn't have been there. Something that shouldn't have moved. Emily didn't sleep that night. She lay fully clothed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, flinching at every sound from the yard. Madison slept soundly, but Emily couldn't shake the image from her mind. It wasn't the shape that haunted her. It was the feeling it left in the air. Something inside that room didn't want to be ignored. Around 3 in the morning, she heard a soft creak at the bedroom door. She shot upright. Madison was no longer in bed. Emily rushed into the hallway and saw her daughter standing quietly at the back door, which was wide open. Madison didn't move. She just stared out into the backyard, as if waiting for someone to arrive. "Madison," Emily whispered, barely holding back her panic. "What are you doing out here, sweetie?" The little girl turned slowly. Her face was blank, distant, as if her mind was somewhere else. "She said she doesn't want to be alone," she replied calmly, without moving. "Who?" Emily asked, stepping closer without raising her voice. "The girl in the old house, out back. She misses her mom." Emily scooped her up and carried her straight to bed. She locked the door and pushed a heavy chair in front of it. She didn't sleep again that night. Madison fell asleep right away, but Emily sat awake for hours, staring into the dark. The next morning, Madison remembered nothing. She had breakfast, drew pictures with her crayons, and put on her school uniform without complaint. When Emily asked if she had any dreams, she just shook her head. But when Emily emptied her daughter's backpack, she found a drawing that chilled her. It wasn't flowers or little houses. It was a dark room with a figure in the back, covered with what looked like a veil. Next to it stood a girl with a long braid, holding the veiled figure's hand. None of the faces were drawn. Emily folded the paper and tucked it between the pages of an old notebook. That same day, while closing the shop, she exchanged a few words with a neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Corinne, who often sold tamales from a folding chair near the entrance. She watched everything, but rarely spoke. "Has your little one been acting strange?" she asked suddenly. Emily froze. Why do you ask? Sometimes children feel things we stopped seeing long ago. That store, it holds on to old things. Not everything that stays hidden stays quiet. Emily didn't know what to say. She nodded politely, smiled, and walked away. That night, Madison got up again. But this time she didn't open any doors. She just stood silently, facing the bedroom wall, whispering. Emily approached slowly and caught the tail end of her daughter's words. She says she's going to show me the inside of her house soon. Emily tried not to overthink it, but the unease settled in her chest like a stone. From that night on, Madison drew more and more. She didn't talk much, but each page showed the same thing, a hooded figure and a girl with braids, always hand in hand, always inside a windowless room. Some drawings even had a strange altar with lit candles. One morning, while Mrs. Harper went to the market, Emily decided to clean the back office. She dusted the shelves, sorted some envelopes, and looked for a rag in the drawers. When she opened one, a poorly stacked photo album almost fell. She caught it just in time, and a page slipped out. It was an old black and white photo, slightly faded with age. In the center stood a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with a long braid, a shy gaze, and a faint, lifeless smile. Emily felt a chill. That was the girl Madison kept drawing, the one she said visited her at night. She flipped through more pages. The same girl appeared again and again, always beside a younger Mrs. Harper, in different corners of the store. One photo showed them standing near the back door. The same one Emily had seen ajar, the same door she was told never to open. She didn't know whether to bring it up, but something deep inside told her not to. Emily returned the album carefully and shut the drawer. Her hands were shaking as she splashed cold water on her face in the bathroom. That day, she couldn't focus. She gave customers the wrong change and forgot to restock the drinks. Mrs. Harper noticed, but said nothing. At one point, she handed Emily a paper bag with pastries. "For Madison," she said simply. Emily thought about refusing it, but didn't have the strength. She thanked her and took it home, though that night, the bag ended up in the trash. When Madison got home from preschool, she ran to hug her mother as usual. She seemed happy, calm. But when Emily looked through her sketchbook, she noticed something new. Under the figure of the girl, Madison had written a name. In crooked letters, it read, Lucilina. "Who's Lucilina, honey?" she asked. "She's the girl," Madison replied naturally. "She told me that's her name, and that she's going to show me her statue soon." Emily didn't know what to say. She didn't want to scare her, but she couldn't keep pretending nothing was happening. That night she went to see Mrs. Thelma, a neighbor known for her prayers and herbal remedies. Emily gave her a version of the story, just the basics. The woman listened quietly. When Emily finished, she said only one thing. "That's not a little girl. It's something that took the shape of one, and it's closer than you think." The following Saturday, Mrs. Harper asked Emily to stay late. It was time to close the books for the month and organize the receipts. Emily agreed without thinking much. She didn't want to raise suspicion or seem weak. Even though the store now felt heavier in certain corners, she pretended everything was fine. It wasn't the time to lose a job. They locked the front at 8 as usual. Mrs. Harper left her in charge while she took some packages to the warehouse. Emily used the moment to go over the day's notes. The silence in the store wasn't peaceful. It was dense, filled with distant echoes, as if the place only breathed when no one was shopping. As she passed the back hallway, something stopped her cold. The door, the one that should always be shut, was wide open. Not cracked, not forced, not ajar, completely open. No one had touched it. Mrs. Harper was out. Emily didn't even have the key. It was impossible, unless something or someone had opened it from the inside. The hallway was dim. Emily felt her chest tighten, as if her body already knew what her mind couldn't accept. Still, she stepped forward. Then another. Curiosity outweighed fear. She couldn't keep imagining. She had to see. Inside, the smell hit her instantly. Dried incense mixed with mildew, dead flowers, and old wax. In one corner, several candles stood in a semicircle around a veiled figure. It wasn't an ordinary statue. No face was visible, just a human-like shape draped in black cloth, as if it refused to be seen. Around the altar were beaded necklaces, colorful ribbons, and small, worn wooden carvings. Religious images hung on the walls, mixed with strange symbols she didn't recognize. None of the pictures had eyes. They were scratched out, covered, or turned toward the wall. Her head spun, not from fear, but from something heavier, something physical, like the air itself had weight. And then she felt it, someone watching her. Though the room was empty, she didn't wait. She turned off her phone light and fled, heart thundering. When Mrs. Harper returned, Emily was already finishing the paperwork in silence. She didn't mention the door. She said nothing about what she had seen, and Mrs. Harper didn't ask. She only gave her a long, unreadable look, like she already knew something had changed. That night, when Emily got home, she found Madison asleep on the couch. She carried her to bed and tucked her in. But just as she lay down, her daughter opened her eyes and whispered, "Lucilina says you saw her too. Now she can show me the rest." From that night on, the house no longer felt safe. Madison began to fall ill in strange ways. It wasn't a constant fever, but headaches, dizziness, and a distant gaze that Emily didn't recognize in her daughter. The doctors couldn't find any clear cause. It might be stress, they said, maybe something viral. They prescribed rest, hydration, and recommended keeping an eye on her. But Emily knew it was something else. Her daughter began waking at midnight, whispering things that didn't always make sense. One night she told her she wasn't scared anymore, that the lady with the candles had promised her that if she obeyed, she could stay and live with her. Another time, she asked if all mums leave their daughters with other families when they feel sad. Emily stopped sleeping. She stayed up night after night, sitting at the edge of the bed, muttering half-remembered prayers from her childhood. Every shadow in the hallway, every creak of the floorboards, set her nerves on edge. Even Aunt Martha, who had always been emotionally distant, began locking her bedroom door at night without explanation. One afternoon, without thinking twice, Emily returned to see Mrs. Thelma. She told her everything. The photos, the door, the figure in the back of the store, the things Madison said. The woman listened silently, stirring dry leaves in a clay bowl. "This isn't a game," she said at last, "and it won't go away on its own." She gave Emily a small bottle of holy water and instructed her to cleanse the house, light rue candles, and protect Madison's sleep with specific prayers for 7 nights. But she was clear about something else too. You have to cut ties with that place. You can't keep working there. If that presence reached your daughter, it's because something was opened, and if you don't close it, it will get worse. Emily didn't want to hear it. She needed the job. She had no other income, no one to rely on. But when she looked at Madison, so thin, so quiet, she knew there was no other option. For 3 consecutive nights, she did the prayers, cleaned every corner of the house with the water Thelma had given her, and placed small open scissors beneath Madison's pillow as instructed. During those 3 nights, the girl didn't speak in her sleep. She didn't get up. She didn't mention Lucilina. That's when Emily decided to quit. She prepared an envelope with the sales ledger and a handwritten note. She didn't want explanations. She wasn't looking for goodbyes. She just wanted to close that chapter in her life. But she knew Mrs. Harper wouldn't let things end so easily. Emily arrived at the shop before opening, intending to leave the envelope on the counter and slip away unnoticed. But Mrs. Harper was already there, sitting in the back of the shop, with the front door still locked, as if she had known Emily would show up. "Are you leaving?" she asked, without looking directly at her. Emily didn't respond. She placed the envelope on the table, her hands trembling. "My daughter's not okay," she said. "I don't know what's going on here, but I know I can't keep coming." Mrs. Harper nodded silently. She stood slowly, walked over to the desk drawer, and pulled out the same photo album Emily had seen weeks earlier. Holding it in both hands, she extended it to her. "You've seen her, haven't you?" "Lucilina." Emily hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "She was my daughter," Mrs. Harper said, her voice almost dry. "She died 15 years ago. A fever. There was nothing we could do. I made promises." She sat again and opened the album to a marked page. There she was, the girl with the long braid, shy expression. On the opposite page, a younger Mrs. Harper embracing her. "After she was gone, I couldn't accept that she had just vanished. I clung to everything people told me might help. Altars, vows, special prayers. They said if I kept the devotion alive, her soul wouldn't be lost." Emily sat across from her, speechless. "I thought if I kept the space sacred, if I followed the rules, no one would get hurt," Mrs. Harper continued. "But over time, I realized there are things we can't control, especially when others come too close." She closed the album gently and returned it to the drawer. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily asked softly. "Because I didn't know if you'd understand. Because I thought maybe this time would be different, but when your daughter started talking about her, I knew it wouldn't last." There was a long silence. Emily wanted to be angry, to scream, to demand why she had let something come near Madison. But she didn't. All she felt was a crushing sadness. "Thank you for everything, Emily," Mrs. Harper said at last. "When you're ready, come pick up your things. I won't stop you." Emily shook her hand goodbye. Neither of them cried. There were no hugs, no promises, just a thick silence loaded with all the things that would never be said. That night, Emily came home and found Madison fast asleep, breathing deeply. She sat beside her, stroked her hair, and whispered that everything was fine now. But deep down, she knew she couldn't be sure it was truly over. Emily never walked past that shop again. She avoided that part of the neighborhood entirely, even when it meant a longer route to the nearest bus stop. One quiet morning, she went to collect her things without speaking to Mrs. Harper. No goodbyes were exchanged, only one final glance, tired and resigned. At home, the atmosphere shifted little by little. Madison stopped talking in her sleep. She no longer drew strange figures, didn't speak of dark rooms or mention Lucilina. She began eating better, laughing more. Emily continued following Thelma's instructions, cleansing with rue, praying at bedtime, keeping the windows open during the day. She didn't know if it truly helped, but at least it brought her some peace of mind. Sometimes, in the early hours, she still felt a shadow pass through the hall or heard the wood creak just before sunrise. But she learned not to focus on it. She told herself it was the sounds of an old house, that everything had been coincidence, a build-up of stress. That's what she repeated on the outside, though deep down she knew some things had gone beyond explanation. Madison seemed to have forgotten Lucilina entirely. She no longer asked about her. She didn't mention the statue, the promises, or those eerie sentences she once spoke without knowing their meaning. Emily thought maybe that was for the best. If her daughter remembered nothing, perhaps she could grow up unscarred by it all. Maybe this was their chance to start over, quietly, gently. But one afternoon, a few weeks after quitting, they were watching TV together when Madison paused. The screen showed a neighborhood segment about new businesses in another state. For a second, a shot of an old shop appeared, a storefront with bead curtains hanging in the entryway. "That store," Madison said, pointing. "There's another girl who lives there. She doesn't want to be alone either." Emily felt her stomach twist. She didn't react immediately. She just turned off the TV with a sharp click, saying nothing. Madison didn't complain. She stared at the blank screen for a few seconds, then went to grab her coloring books. Emily sat frozen. She didn't ask. She didn't want to know more. That night, before closing the curtains, she looked out the window. The sky was clear, windless, silent. Even so, she lit a candle by the sink and let it burn until dawn. She never spoke of it again. She never looked for answers. But she came to understand something she couldn't admit aloud. Some promises don't end when the prayer does. Some simply move on. And some ties, once made, don't break. They just find a new direction.